Tim Bosma. In May 2013, you and I see a contractor in Ancaster climb into his own truck with two strangers for a fatal test drive. His wife, Charlene, watched them from the driveway. He promised her that he would be right back. He was never seen alive again. His body was destroyed that night in a commercial machine branded the Eliminator. The man who owned that machine was actually a serial killer who had already taken 2 other lives. Timothy Bosma was a devoted family man from Ancaster, a quiet community within the city of Hamilton. He had built the family home with his own hands and was a regular member of his local church. He was married to Charlene, and they had a 2-year-old daughter. They were even hoping for a second child. Money was tight, so Tim listed his black 2007 Dodge Ram for $24,000 on a trading site. Charlene later described the truck as a total lemon that was constantly breaking down on them. Dellen Millard was the wealthy only child of Wayne Millard and Madeline Burns, born in 1985. His grandfather had founded Millardair, a charter aviation company that built a massive family fortune. At 14, Millard set a world record as the youngest person to fly both a helicopter and a plane solo. He owned over $4 million in real estate, including a 100-acre farm in Ayr, Ontario. Despite his wealth, Millard organized late-night missions to steal equipment just for the thrill of the crime. He always carried a distinctive satchel and had the word ambition tattooed on his wrist. Mark Smitch came from a middle-class family in Oakville. He was born in August 1987. He had a criminal record for petty offenses, including drug possession and impaired driving. He sold contraband for a living and dreamed of being a rapper. His girlfriend later described his bond with Millard. Mark cared for Dellen more than any other person in his life. He was in love with him. On May 4th, a burner phone was used to contact him about the truck. On May 6th, Millard and Smitch arrived at the house on foot, claiming a friend had dropped them off. One wore a bright orange shirt. The other had a red hoodie pulled low over his head. Tim asked his wife if he should go with them. She said yes, because she wanted the truck back. During the drive, Bosma was shot with a pistol. Both Millard and Smitch later blamed each other for the murder. Just after midnight, we see surveillance footage from a business near the airport hangar showing a truck pulling a trailer, followed by an SUV. Tim was incinerated that night. By 10:30 p.m. that evening, Charlene had already called the police to report him missing. The hashtag #FindTimBosma trended across Canada. On May 9th, his deactivated phone was found in Brantford. Charlene made an emotional public plea. She said it was just a truck, a stupid truck. You do not need him, but I do. Our little daughter needs her daddy. By May 10th, police identified Millard after a witness described a man with a satchel and an ambition tattoo. Meanwhile, an employee recognized the truck from the news, photographed the VIN, and alerted Crime Stoppers. Everything matched. Millard was arrested on May 11th. On Mother's Day, the truck was found inside a trailer at Millard's mother's home, its seats completely removed. Police found gunshot residue, blood, and Millard's fingerprints all over the inside of the vehicle. Bone fragments were recovered from the farm incinerator. Smitch was arrested right after Tim's memorial service. The trial began in February 2016 at the John Sopinka Courthouse in Hamilton. Nearly 100 witnesses testified. After 5 days of deliberation, both were found guilty of first-degree murder. Each received a life sentence with no chance of parole for 25 years. In June 2023, the Ontario Court of Appeal dismissed both of their appeals. In November 2025, Millard was moved from a maximum security prison to a medium security facility. The Bosma family expressed total outrage, calling Millard a cold-blooded, psychopathic monster. Charlene later revealed that Tim's remains were returned to her in a box no bigger than a shoebox. You and I see how a simple truck listing led to death and uncovered a cold-blooded serial killer. But the next case reveals who Millard had already killed before Tim Bosma ever posted that ad: Laura Babcock. On the evening of July 3rd, 2012, a 23-year-old Toronto woman climbed into a car at Kipling Station with a man she had known for years. At 7:03 p.m., she made her final outgoing call to check her voicemail. At 7:30 p.m., the man sent a short message to his associate. He claimed to be on a mission. After that, her phone went silent forever, and her body was never found. Chillingly, a rap song recorded on her own iPad would help convict the men who killed her. Laura Babcock was a University of Toronto graduate with a degree in English and drama. Friends remembered her as a bubbly, outgoing person, full of life and whimsy. She called friends constantly, loved her Maltese dog, Lacey, and often meowed in public just to make people laugh. She struggled deeply with anxiety, depression, and borderline personality disorder. By spring 2012, she was homeless and couch surfing, having worked briefly for an escort service in the downtown area. Babcock had met Dellen Millard at a pub in late 2008. They were friends, but also occasional lovers. In February 2011, Millard began dating a new woman but continued seeing Babcock. Intense jealousy erupted. On Laura's 23rd birthday, the girlfriend sent a message saying, "Happy birthday." She boasted about when she first slept with Dellen. The most critical text came in April, when Millard vowed to remove Laura from their lives. He wrote that he intended to hurt her first, and then make her leave. He vowed to remove her from their lives, comparing Laura to a disease he had to eliminate. His girlfriend replied that hearing those dark things made her feel really loved and warm on the inside. On July 2nd, 2012, Millard purchased a .32 caliber Smith & Wesson revolver. In the days before she vanished, Babcock and Millard's phones made contact over 110 times. On July 3rd, Millard picked her up at Kipling Station and drove her to his Etobicoke home. The next day, Millard ordered a rush delivery for a mattress and photographed a large object wrapped in a blue tarp. His calendar later included a note about a barn smell check. When a commercial incinerator arrived, Millard and others worked hard to get the machine operational. On July 23rd, Millard texted that the machine was finally warmed up and ready for meat. That night, he searched Google to find out what temperature is required for cremation. Photos on the phone show Mark Smitch grinning in front of the incinerator with an ash scraper. Forensic experts identified the objects as human bones. Now, you and I must look at the most disturbing evidence of all. A rap song was composed on Laura's own iPad, which the men had renamed as Mark's iPad. The lyrics stated she started as skin and bone, but ended up on some ashy stone. Smitch performed the rap on video. He later told two friends that the song was real. How could anyone write a song about their crime and perform it on the victim's own iPad? Babcock was only connected to Millard after his arrest for the killing of Tim Bosma. Police found Babcock's red duffel bag and her renamed iPad at the home of Mark Smike. Investigators recovered 65 incriminating letters written by Millard. The murder trial finally began on October 23, 2017. Millard represented himself, which allowed him to cross-examine Laura's grieving father directly in the courtroom. He directly asked Clayton if he was nervous, being questioned by the man accused of the crime. The final verdict, December 16, 2017. Both men were found guilty of first-degree murder, despite the shocking fact that Laura Babcock's body was never found by the police. Her parents spent 18 months trying to obtain a death certificate, since the coroner could not issue one without her remains. They even received voter registration cards for Laura in 2018 and 2019. In December 2019, Ontario amended the Vital Statistics Act with a regulation called Laura's Law to help families register a death without remains. The Premier personally delivered the death certificate. It was a case defined by a song on an iPad and no body. But the investigation into Millard's dark history was not finished just yet. Stick with me. We're about to see what police discovered when they looked backward in time. On November 29, 2012, a man told police he had found his 71-year-old father dead in bed with a gunshot wound through the eye. The coroner officially ruled the death a self-inflicted act. Within 48 hours, the file was closed. But when the son was arrested months later for another murder, detectives finally began re-evaluating every piece of evidence. What they uncovered changed the story entirely. Wayne Millard, age 71, was a veteran pilot at Air Canada and the head of Millard Air, the family aviation firm. His father had launched the charter airline in 1963 at Toronto's Pearson International Airport. After a bankruptcy in 1990, the family shifted their focus to high-level aircraft maintenance. By 2012, Wayne was expanding Millard MRO inside a massive new hangar at the Waterloo Regional Airport. On November 1st, 2012, just weeks before he died, he finally secured a Critical Transport Canada certification. The airport manager recalled Wayne being overjoyed. Yet on November 29th, his son Dellen told police he found Wayne dead in his bed around 6:30 p.m. Wayne was lying on his side with a single gunshot wound through his left eye. Police found a .32 caliber Smith & Wesson inside a Lululemon bag, shoved between the bed and the dresser. Dr. David Evans ruled it a suicide within 2 days, noting Dellen seemed strangely calm and showed no signs of grief. Dellen claimed his father was an untreated alcoholic suffering from deep depression, but the conclusion was deeply flawed. A self-inflicted shot through the eye is almost unheard of in these cases. Even the coroner admitted he had never seen anything like it. The gun's placement in a bag was impossible. Wayne couldn't have moved it after such a devastating, instant injury. No one checked for fingerprints or DNA. They didn't even run a toxicology report. The coroner thought the scene looked suspicious, but the detectives promised to follow up later. They never returned. Stick with me as we unpack this cold case together. Hit that subscribe button and join our community of investigators. When Dellen was arrested for Tim Bosma's murder in May 2013, Toronto police finally reopened the file. This time, the forensics were impossible to ignore. Tests found Dellen's DNA on the grip, with nearly zero chance it belonged to anyone else. Wayne's DNA was missing. Cell tower data placed Dellen at his father's house from 1 in the morning until dawn on the night he died. His alibi that he was in Oakville at a friend's house fell completely apart. An expert testified the wound and gun position were completely inconsistent with a self-inflicted shot. Pathology showed Wayne's eye was actually closed when the trigger was pulled. He was killed while he slept. Nobody except Dellen ever mentioned depression. Wayne's girlfriend insisted he was actually in great spirits. On April 10, 2014, Dellen was charged with first-degree murder for the death of his father. The bench trial, under Justice Maureen Forrestal, finally began in May 2018. Prosecutors argued Dellen killed Wayne to seize his inheritance and stop the hangar project from draining the family's wealth. After the funeral, Dellen fired everyone at the company, scrapped the new certifications, and permanently shut down the business. On September 24, 2018, the judge delivered a crushing final verdict. I am satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that Dellen Millard murdered his father by shooting him while he slept. Seeing no other possible theory, the court handed Millard his 3rd consecutive life sentence that December. He simply smirked and rolled his eyes. 3 lives taken in less than 1 year. First, a former lover in July. Then his own father in November 2012. Finally, Tim Bosma in May 2013. A total stranger. 3 different victims, 1 shared incinerator. You and I have to wonder if police had looked closer at Wayne. Would Tim Bosma still be alive today? But our next story involves a duo whose crimes were even more infamous. Their case featured a failure even more devastating than this one. Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French. In June 1991, a couple wed in a beautiful Ontario church. That same afternoon, the bride's remains were found hidden in cement at the bottom of Lake Gibson. It was the groom who had put them there. Paul Bernardo and Carla Homula would become known as the Ken and Barbie Killers, the most infamous criminal duo in Canadian history. 14-year-old Leslie Erin Maffey was a grade 9 student at M.M. Robinson High School in Burlington, Ontario. On June 14, 1991, Leslie attended a wake for a friend who was killed in a car accident. She arrived home around 1:50 a.m., only to find the side door bolted shut. Her parents had locked the door as punishment for her missing curfew that night. Standing outside her own home, she encountered Paul Bernardo, who was out stealing license plates. He forced her into his car at knife point. 15-year-old Kristen Dawn French was a student at Holy Cross Catholic Secondary School in St. Catharines. She was an active member of both the precision ice skating and girls rowing teams. On April 16, 1992, Carla Homula approached her with a map, pretending she needed help with directions. Bernardo struck from behind, forcing French into the car at knife point. He held her captive for 3 days during Easter weekend. Kristen showed extraordinary defiance, reportedly telling Bernardo, "Some things are worth dying for." Paul was born on August 27, 1964, in Scarborough. He earned a commerce degree from the University of Toronto and worked as an accountant before turning to smuggling in the late 80s. He committed at least 14 attacks in Scarborough, earning the terrifying title of the Scarborough Rapist. Carla Homula, born May 4, 1970, met Bernardo at a pet convention in 1987 when she was only 17. Her IQ measured 131. She worked as a vet tech. They married on June 29, 1991, the very day Leslie's remains were discovered. Leslie was held for 24 hours while the couple filmed their horrific crimes on videotape. She was killed on June 16, 1991, Father's Day. They dismembered her with a saw, encased the remains in cement, and dumped them into Lake Gibson. The torso block alone weighed over 200 pounds. Her braces were what finally helped identify her. Kristen was held for 3 days before they killed her on April 19, 1992. They washed her body, cut her hair, and then attended a family Easter dinner that very evening. Her body was found in a ditch on April 30th, but we have to look at the investigative failure that allowed all of this to happen. In November 1990, Bernardo gave his DNA to police during the Scarborough investigation. Those samples sat untouched for 25 months at Toronto's Center of Forensic Sciences. During that time, he attacked more victims and killed 2 innocent girls. Justice Archie Campbell's 1996 report found systemic failures and clashing police egos within the investigation. What followed became known as the infamous deal with the devil, after Bernardo severely beat Carla in January 1993. She finally began revealing his crimes to the authorities. On May 14, 1993, prosecutors offered Carla a 12-year plea deal in exchange for her testimony. The prosecution had almost no evidence except her word, as the tapes had not yet been found. But Bernardo's first attorney, Ken Murray, secretly took 6 tapes from the house and hid them for nearly 17 months before turning them in. Once revealed, the tape showed Hamula was actually a willing, enthusiastic participant, shattering her claims of being forced. But the deal could not be undone. In September 1995, Bernardo was convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment with a dangerous offender designation. He has been denied parole 3 times, most recently in November 2024. In May 2023, his transfer to a medium security prison in Quebec sparked massive national outrage. Carla was released on July 4, 2005, after serving her full 12-year sentence. She remarried, had 3 children, and in 2017 was found volunteering at a Montreal school, teaching kids to knit. As of 2025, she is believed to still be living in the Montreal area. Untested DNA sat in a lab for 2 years while 2 more girls lost their lives. But in the next case, a different kind of surveillance footage captured something no parent should ever see. Tori Stafford. On April 8, 2009, at 3:32 p.m., a security camera near a Woodstock high school captured a single piece of footage that would haunt an entire nation for years. A young girl was being led down Avenue F by a woman she didn't know. Looking at the video, the child didn't seem to be struggling. She walked along willingly. She was only 8 years old and had been promised a new puppy. Tragically, she would never make it home. Victoria Tori Stafford was a 3rd grader at Oliver Stevens Public School. She lived with her mother, Tara, and her older brother, Darren. Her parents had separated, and her father's name was Rodney Stafford. The night before she vanished, Tori spent her time decorating her new bedroom with princess posters and her favorite dolls. The family had only moved in a week prior. 18-year-old Terry Lynn McClintock lured the girl away by talking about dogs. McClintock claimed she owned a Shih Tzu just like Tori's and promised to show her a puppy nearby. They walked to a parking lot where Michael Rafferty, 28, was waiting in his Honda Civic. McClintock shoved Tori into the car. That same vehicle had been spotted on camera near the school 3 times that day. McClintock later confessed that Rafferty told her to snatch a young child because the younger they were, the easier they were to control. They headed east on Highway 401, even stopping to buy illegal substances along the way. At a Home Depot, McClintock bought a claw hammer and green garbage bags while Rafferty used a nearby ATM. Both suspects were captured on security video. They drove to a remote, quiet area near Mount Forest, about 80 miles away from Woodstock. In the back seat, Rafferty attacked Tori. McClintock testified she could hear the child's screams and her desperate pleas to make him stop. A plastic bag was pulled over Tori's head. McClintock then struck her at least 4 times with the hammer. The autopsy revealed 16 fractured ribs and a damaged liver. Either of those injuries alone would have been fatal. Her small body was hidden under heavy rocks beneath a large evergreen tree. You and I have to wonder How does an 8-year-old vanish in broad daylight outside her school without anyone stopping it? The OPP took over the investigation on April 17th, officially calling it an abduction. When the footage went national, Tori's mother recognized McClintock because they had crossed paths in the community before. McClintock was picked up on an outstanding warrant and brought in for intense questioning. She lied at first, but after a polygraph test, she finally admitted to being the woman in the video. She named Rafferty as her partner and began detailing every horrific thing that happened after they left the school grounds. On July 19, 2009, over 100 days later, Sergeant Jim Smith finally found Tori's remains in a field. Guided by maps McClintock drew by hand. She was wearing a Hannah Montana shirt and the butterfly earrings she had borrowed from her mother that very morning. Those earrings and that shirt were the only way to confirm the nightmare that investigators already feared. McClintock pleaded guilty to first-degree murder on April 30th, 2010. Rafferty's trial finally began 2 years later in London, Ontario. On May 11th, 2012, he was found guilty on all 3 criminal charges. Justice Heaney called him a monster for snuffing out a beautiful, vivacious life. But the national outrage did not end with his sentencing. In December, McClintock was moved to a healing lodge in Saskatchewan after claiming Indigenous heritage, despite the facility having no fences. When the public found out, a massive outcry erupted. Tori's father even led a protest rally on Parliament Hill. By November, the government tightened transfer rules and McClintock was sent back to a traditional federal prison. Currently, she is serving her time at the Grand Valley Institution in Kitchener. Rafferty was moved to a medium security facility back in 2018. McClintock will not be eligible for parole until 2035. Rafferty's date is 2037. A camera, a puppy, and a little girl who simply trusted a stranger. But as you and I will see, in our next case, the victims were not strangers at all. They were daughters, and their killers were their own family, the Shafia family. On the morning of June 30th, 2009, a park worker noticed a dark oil slick at the Kingston Mills locks. Police responded to a call and discovered a black Nissan Sentra submerged deep in the water. 4 women were found dead inside. 3 were young sisters, and the 4th was their father's first wife. The killer sat nearby in a minivan. Unbeknownst to them, police had already bugged the vehicle for surveillance. Sob Shafia. At 19, Zob fled to a shelter in April 2009. She briefly married before family pressure forced an annulment. Sahar, 17, kept a secret boyfriend. Investigators later found condoms that had been hidden away in her bedroom. She had tried to end her own life after her mother berated her for having that relationship. Guy, only 13, begged school staff and social workers to finally place her into foster care. She warned police that her father had threatened to kill her and her sisters on many different occasions. Rona Amir Muhammad, age 50, was Shafi's first wife, brought to Canada under the false pretense of being a cousin. She raised Tuba's 7 children as her own. Her diary revealed that her husband made her life a constant, agonizing torture. Muhammad Shafi, 58 at the time of the verdict, he was a wealthy businessman who built a fortune in Dubai's markets. He invested over $2.2 million in Quebec. Shafi's second wife, Tuba Muhammad Yakia, was 42 years old. Hamim Shafia. At 21, the eldest son acted as the family enforcer. He physically controlled his sisters while the entire family visited Niagara Falls. The prosecution's theory, ultimately accepted by the jury, was that the 4 victims were drowned or knocked out before being placed inside the Nissan at the locks. When the car became stuck, the family used their Lexus SUV to ram the Nissan directly into the water. Fragments from the Lexus headlight and letters torn from the Nissan's nameplate proved there had been a collision. Reaching the water meant driving past a locked gate, over a curb, and performing 2 difficult U-turns. There was no way that car ended up in the water by accident. 3 weeks into the investigation, police secretly installed high-tech surveillance equipment inside the Shafia family's minivan. The recordings captured Muhammad Shafi, making several cold statements that would eventually seal his fate. He was recorded saying, "May the devil defecate on their graves. I tell myself, you did well. Even if they lived 100 more times, you would do the same again." He declared that even if they faced the gallows, nothing was more precious to him than his honor. Hammond's laptop revealed a darker plot. He searched for murder locations on June 20th. Cell data placed him in Kingston days before the rest of the family arrived. What kind of father says he would kill his children 100 times over? The trial lasted from October 2011 to January 2012, under Justice Robert Moranger in Kingston. The proceedings were held in 4 languages: English, French, Dari, and Spanish. After 15 hours of deliberation, all 3 were found guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder on January 29th. Justice Moranger called it a despicable and heinous crime that was truly difficult to even conceive of. Each received life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years. Their legal appeals were dismissed by the Ontario Court of Appeal in November 2016. By 2017, the Supreme Court of Canada had denied their final request to appeal. Deportation orders were issued for both parents in 2018. All 3 will be eligible for parole in July 2034. Perhaps the most disturbing part is the list of missed opportunities. All 3 daughters had begged authorities for help. G asked a detective for foster care, while Sahar had already tried to end her own life once. But every time the girls were questioned in front of their parents, they fell silent. A detective eventually closed the file on Guy, citing a lack of evidence. Just a few months later, all 3 sisters were dead. A bugged minivan caught a father's confession after his daughter's cries went unheard. Now, you and I turn to a mystery in Canadian history, because even 8 years later, no one knows the identity of the killer, Barry and Honey Sherman. On December 15, 2017, a real estate agent showing a mansion in North York, Toronto, walked into the pool area and found a scene that would spark the most expensive, unsolved investigation in Canadian history. 2 bodies sat side by side, legs stretched out with black leather belts looped around their necks. Tied to a metal railing, the belts held their heads upright. Rigor mortis had set in. They had been dead for about 36 hours. Barry Sherman, 75, was the founder and CEO of Apotex. This was Canada's largest generic drug company, boasting over 10,000 employees and $1.5 billion in yearly revenue. Forbes estimated his net worth at $3.2 billion US. He held a doctorate in astrophysics from MIT and belonged to the Order of Canada. He was notoriously litigious. Apotex filed roughly 1,200 lawsuits against the government. Sherman once told staff the company was a legal firm that sold medicine on the side. He once mused openly, "The branded drug companies hate us." "The thought crossed my mind," he said. "Why didn't they just hire someone to knock me off?" Honey Sherman was 70. The daughter of Holocaust survivors, she was a pillar of the Jewish community in Toronto, serving on hospital boards and donating millions as a major philanthropist. The couple had 4 children. Their mansion was listed for $6.9 million when they were found. Both sat by the pool, held upright by those leather belts. Marks on their wrists suggested they had been bound, yet no ropes or zip ties were found at the scene. A faint ligature mark under each belt suggested a thinner wire or cord was the actual weapon used. Investigators estimated they died on December 13th, roughly 36 hours before being discovered. Toronto police initially viewed the scene as a murder-suicide, framing it as one partner harming the other. The family refused to believe it and hired Dr. David Chiasson, the former chief pathologist, who performed a second autopsy and concluded it was a targeted double homicide. 6 weeks later, on January 26, 2018, police officially reclassified the case as a double murder. But from the very beginning, the investigation was riddled with critical errors. Private investigators found that police failed to vacuum the scene and missed 25 distinct palm and fingerprints. They missed signs of front door lock tampering. They waited days to canvass the neighborhood, and the lead detective took 4 days just to visit the crime scene. 4 days for a case involving a billionaire couple found dead inside their own home. That initial misclassification likely compromised the case, allowing vital evidence to vanish before anyone knew what to look for. We have to ask, how does one of the richest couples in Canada lie dead in their home for 36 hours without anyone noticing? In December 2021, police released a grainy 22-second video showing a figure near the house that night. The person had a head covering and a distinctive gait, kicking up their right foot with every single step. That individual was classified as a suspect but they remain unidentified despite millions of people watching that footage online. A $35 million reward, the largest in Canadian history, still remains unclaimed today. The hunt has reached 5 different countries as police follow a complex trail of money hidden overseas. By June 2025, only one detective remained on the case, hoping to use artificial intelligence to find answers. In November 2025, their daughter Alex said she felt slightly encouraged that the investigation was still active. Workers demolished the Sherman mansion in March of 2019. Apotex was sold in April 2023 for roughly 3 to 4 billion Canadian dollars. As of April 2026, the mystery remains unsolved. 8 years later, $35 million is still waiting for an answer. But the next case is also cold, and in a much smaller town, the silence is just as deafening. Sonia, Varaschin. On the evening of August 29, 2010, a 42-year-old pediatric nurse in Orangeville, Ontario, visited her parents. Back home, she left her mother a voicemail asking to bake a cake for a friend. That was the very last time her mother would ever hear her voice. That night, a neighbor heard shouting and the screech of tires. By morning, Sonia had simply vanished. She was a dedicated pediatric nurse at Headwaters Healthcare Center, a woman who never missed a single shift. She had graduated with honors from the nursing program at Humber College. Her career included difficult stints in the burn and cancer wards at Toronto Children's Hospital. Her colleagues remembered her as a kind soul, always ready with a smile. She lived alone in a quiet townhouse, about 80 kilometers northwest of Toronto. At 10 a.m. on August 30th, police found her white Toyota Corolla abandoned behind a business on Broadway, less than a mile from her front door. The car doors and trunk were left wide open, as if someone fled in a frantic hurry. Investigators discovered blood smears on the rear bumper of the vehicle. Back at her townhouse, police found a significant amount of blood inside and on the steps. There were absolutely no signs of forced entry. This meant the door was unlocked, or Sonia knew the person she let inside. Her bed linens were missing from the room, likely used to wrap and transport her body from the scene. On September 5, 2010, a man walking his dog discovered human remains in a wooded area off Beach Grove Side Road, 12 kilometers away. Forensic testing confirmed the remains were Sonia's on September 7th. The remote location suggested the person who brought her there knew the back roads of Dufferin County intimately. Investigators wondered who would target a nurse who lived alone, had no known enemies, and whose biggest concern that evening was her mother's cake. The OPP held a 3-day investigative summit in December 2010, involving 25 investigators and behavioral experts from the RCMP and the FBI Behavioral Unit. Their profile described the killer as a cold-blooded male who was very familiar with the Orangeville area. Detectives believed Sonia was targeted specifically, and that the person responsible actually knew her. However, the connection may have been one-sided, meaning she might not have realized the person was interested in her. A partial male DNA profile was recovered from the scene, but it remains unmatched to this day. Police described it as a weak sample, degraded by the hot and rainy conditions before she was found. In May 2011, the OPP collected voluntary DNA from over 600 men who knew Sonia, but no match was ever found. A size 10 or 11 bloody boot print from a Dakota or Wind River brand sold at Mark's Work Warehouse was left at the location. That single footprint remains one of the few physical clues left. Police even investigated Sonia's history on dating websites like Plenty of Fish. They looked for anyone tracking her movements. The case remains unsolved as of April 2026. Over 1,500 tips were received, and 500 people were interviewed. A $50,000 reward remains active today. In 2025, lead detective Sean Glelford noted that DNA technology is improving daily, offering new hope for the case. The OPP maintains they will never close an unsolved homicide. Her official cause of death has never been disclosed. It remains a secret held only by the police and the killer. A missing sheet, a boot print, and a DNA ghost. But in another case, science worked fast. Just 39 days. On the evening of May 12, 2003, a young girl went missing. 10-year-old Holly Jones was walking home from a friend's house in a Toronto neighborhood. It was a short, familiar route she had walked many times before. Tragically, She never reached her front door. Within 39 days, investigators used one of the largest DNA dragnets in Canadian history to catch the man responsible, all thanks to a Pepsi can. Holly Maria Jones was a bright grade 5 student at St. Luigi Catholic Elementary School. She was the youngest of 4 children who loved music, dreamt of singing, and excelled at both basketball and cross-country running. Today, we look back to May 12th, when she walked home between 6 and 6:30 p.m. along Perth Avenue. Michael Breyer, a 35-year-old software developer. He lived in a triplex at 1450 Bloor Street West, right on Holly's route home. That afternoon, fueled by drink and illicit material, he spotted Holly on a corner and grabbed her. Inside his apartment, Breyer attacked Holly and strangled her. She was dead within 25 minutes. He hid her in his fridge, then used a saw to dismember her. For 3 days, he scattered remains across the city, even taking her torso on the subway. The next morning, he dumped a weighted suitcase into the cold waters of Lake Ontario. Other remains went out with the trash. By May 13th, her body began washing up. Ontario issued its first Amber Alert. Investigators launched a massive DNA dragnet, asking every man on the route for a voluntary sample. Police visited Brier's home. 4 things raised immediate suspicion. Green carpet fibers matched those found on the victim's remains. Dumbbells matched the weights in the lake. And the room smelled strongly of bleach. Only 3 men refused to cooperate. Under heavy surveillance, Brier tossed a Pepsi can into a public bin. Detectives quickly grabbed it. The DNA matched skin found under Holly's fingernails. The odds were 1 in 220,000. More DNA from his home, matched at 1 in 68 billion. A discarded soda can solve the entire mystery for us. He nearly got away with it. Brier was arrested 39 days after the murder. During a 3-hour videotaped confession, he admitted everything, claiming that viewing illegal material on his computer triggered his violent actions. He claimed the more he watched, the more he craved it. His claim sparked massive debate, though he had admitted to these dark urges for years. Brier pleaded guilty in June 2004, receiving life with no parole for 25 years. He told the court that men like him should be locked away forever. He confessed he failed as a human. His first parole date is 2028. No hearings have happened yet. This case forced the creation of a national sex offender registry. The new registry law was signed in April 2004 and went into effect later that December. The case also led to Bill C-2, creating much tougher minimum sentences for predators. A single can, a DNA match, and a legacy born from a child's tragic death. The final case we will examine together happened 4 years later. This time, the killer was not a stranger. It was someone with her own name, Aksa Pav. In December 2007, a man in Ontario called 911 and said 7 haunting words. "I killed my daughter with my hands." Officers rushed to the home and found 16-year-old Aksa lying on her bed, still fully clothed, with blood coming from her nose. She died later that night, but the man who confessed was not the actual killer. He was protecting his son. Aksa Parvaves was a grade 11 student at Applewood Heights Secondary in Mississauga. She was the youngest of 8 children. The family had moved from Pakistan to Canada in 2001. The women in the home dressed traditionally and did not work. Her siblings had arranged marriages, but Aksa's future had not been decided yet. Aksa was different, choosing Western clothes over tradition. She refused the hijab and wanted a job, which her father strictly forbade. She wanted to socialize outside the family community. Just 48 hours before she died, the girl went to the cinema for the very first time. Her basement bedroom was the only space in the house that lacked a door. It was the only way into her parents' room. On December 5th, Mohammed Parvaves stood before the family and declared that Aksa had to die. Soon after, her brother Wakas approached a co-worker named Steve Warda about getting a weapon and detailed the plot. Wakas would do it while their father agreed to take the blame. He even asked Warda what happened to people who committed murder in Canada. Around 7:20 a.m. on December 10th, Wakas picked up Aksa at her bus stop and drove her back to the family home. She had been hiding with a friend's family since late November, desperate to escape her home. It was 7:30 a.m. Inside her bedroom, Wakas strangled Aksa while their father was in the room. 12 people were in the house. Those in the next rooms reported hearing no disturbances. Mohammed woke his other children to say he had killed their sister. He called 911 before 8 a.m., but the forensics told another story. Wakas's DNA was found under Aksa's right-hand fingernails, proof that she fought for her life in her final moments.